McConnell Dowell is a major player in the Philippine construction sector. By 2011, they wrapped up several massive infrastructure projects, including the Magat Dam. But the end of those contracts triggered an immediate corporate crisis. Without new projects of that scale to replace them, McConnell Dowell's revenue dropped by 74%. Management needed to restructure. Inside the corporate office, Archimedes Bernal was the manager of business development. While the broader company was losing significant revenue, Bernal had just played a key role in acquiring the multi-million-dollar Palilla wind farm project. Despite that success, management eliminated his role. They handed Bernal a notice of termination due to redundancy and paid out his standard statutory separation pay. From the outside, this looks like a straightforward business decision, prompted by a severe financial downturn. Yet, when this specific case finally reached the Philippine Supreme Court, the justices firmly ruled the termination an illegal dismissal. Severe corporate financial bleeding does not give employers a blank check to bypass strict labor laws. This raises an immediate question for any corporate practitioner. How exactly does a company with a documented 74% revenue drop fail to legally justify laying off a single manager? Philippine labor law requires corporate redundancy to meet specific evidentiary standards. When a company falls short of these requirements, the mathematical timeline of their financial liability shifts. First, we will evaluate the strict burden of proof required for corporate redundancy. Second, we will deconstruct the distinct mathematical mechanics of separation pay. And finally, we will thoroughly explore the legal boundaries of bad faith regarding the HR practice of placing an employee on garden leave. Carefully deconstructing this single ruling provides a clear, clinical blueprint for how the Philippine Supreme Court parses complex employer-employee conflicts. Article 298 of the Philippine Labor Code recognizes redundancy as an authorized cause for termination. However, the court has consistently held that declaring redundancy is not an unbridled management prerogative. In the case of Asian Alcohol Corporation versus NLRC, the court established 4 mandatory requisites for a valid redundancy program. 1. Written notice to the employee and the DOLE. 2. Payment of separation pay. 3. Good faith in abolishing the positions. And 4. Fair and reasonable criteria. McConnell Dowell proved compliance with the procedural steps. They sent the required written notice to the DOLE, and they paid Bernal his statutory redundancy pay. The legality of Bernal's dismissal depended on the specific documentation behind the final 2 requisites, good faith and reasonable criteria. To prove they acted in good faith, the company submitted their financial audits. Their primary defense was that the massive 74% revenue drop justified the elimination of Bernal's role. The court rejected this logic. Financial loss justifies retrenchment to prevent further losses, but it does not automatically prove redundancy. Redundancy strictly requires evidence that an employee's services are in excess of what the enterprise actually requires. As a secondary defense, the company submitted an organizational chart only proves that a position was eliminated. It provides zero insight into the criteria management used to decide who would stay and who would be fired. The justices explicitly noted what was missing from the record: feasibility studies, detailed job descriptions, and specific role evaluation rubrics approved by the board of directors. Relying on bare assertions of financial loss without a documented decision-making matrix turns a standard business restructuring into an illegal dismissal. Because the court ruled the redundancy program invalid, the dismissal was illegal. By default, the legal remedy for an illegally dismissed employee in the Philippines is reinstatement and full back wages. But reinstatement was impossible here. Bernal's position no longer existed, and the relationship between him and management was severely strained. When reinstatement is off the table, the court applies an alternative legal remedy: separation pay in lieu of reinstatement. This is where the specific math of liability drastically changes. Look at this timeline. Standard redundancy pay is calculated from the start of the employee's tenure up to the exact date of termination. In Bernal's case, 2009 to 2012. By paying this out, the company believed their financial liability was permanently capped. But separation pay in lieu of reinstatement operates under a different rule. It accrues continuously from the date of hire all the way to the finality of the Supreme Court decision. This new calculation spans a much longer period, extending the timeline of liability directly through the years of litigation. The court ordered the company to pay separation pay covering the entire 2009 to 2021 timeline. The smaller redundancy payout they advanced back in 2012 is simply subtracted from this new total. A procedural failure in a redundancy program transforms a capped one-time payout into nearly a decade of continuous corporate liability. Beyond the dispute over separation pay, Bernal filed a secondary legal claim demanding moral and exemplary damages, arguing that McConnell-Dowell's management acted in bad faith during his termination. He pointed to their conduct during his 30-day notice period. Management immediately stripped him of his company ID, cut his email access, and expressly ordered him not to report to the office for his final month. Does treating an executive like a security risk during their termination notice period constitute malicious intent under the law? This practice is known in human resources as garden leave. It originated in the United Kingdom as a corporate protection tactic, keeping an employee on the payroll during their notice period, but barring them from performing actual work or contacting clients. The Philippine Supreme Court validated garden leave in the Mejahila versus Wrigley decision, noting that there is no prohibition against this arrangement under Philippine labor law. The logic is entirely practical. Keeping a departing executive away from the premises prevents potential corporate sabotage and protects commercially sensitive data. It is recognized as a valid management prerogative. Applying that logic here, the court deleted the lower court's award for moral and exemplary damages. McConnell-Dowell's actions during the notice period were defensive measures, not evidence of malice. Philippine labor law protects an employer's right to secure its operations. The court maintains a strict boundary between procedural failures and actual malicious intent. The McConnell-Dowell decision operates across three distinct legal vectors: the failed redundancy test, the extended timeline of separation pay, and the validated use of garden leave. First, financial distress is merely the context for downsizing. It does not serve as legal proof of redundancy. Second, executing an illegal dismissal transforms a clean, capped payout into an open-ended liability that accrues for years. Finally, despite losing the primary illegal dismissal case, management retains the defensive right to utilize garden leave without automatically triggering moral damages. The actionable takeaway for corporate counsel is straightforward. To survive judicial scrutiny, a company must document its decision-making matrix, creating feasibility studies and role rubrics as rigorously as it audits its finances. In Philippine labor law, the mathematical consequences of how a company lets someone go are dictated entirely by the paper trail left behind.